Live, I can't tell. Been a while since I've done a live stream. Looks like I'm live. I just don't see my screen. Why not? Why not? Why not? Why not? I think I'm live. Am I live? That's a good question. The chat's working. That's cool. If you're on already and you're seeing that this is live, let me know, because I can't seem to tell if this is live or not. Let's go straight to my stream and see. That's cool. Okay. All right. We're live. You're on. It's been so long since I've been live that I don't even know what I'm doing. What are we doing? We're doing exactly this. You're going to see the cover art for this live show. Comparing Homedesigner 2026 to Chief Architect Premiere X17. And why would I do that? And let me also just kind of shape the way that I approach this. It's not a true comparison per se. I will, of course, switch back and forth between the Chief line and the Premiere, the Premiere line and the Homedesigner line. It's more about me talking about the features of Homedesigner, not so much comparing them to the Chief Architect line. When I say that I'm comparing them, what I'm talking about specifically is that I know the Premiere line so well that I would tell you, hey, things are not in this Homedesigner line, and those are things maybe I would like. And I will look at proactive solutions to making the Homedesigner line work more like the Premiere line, if it's at all possible. I wanted to start this live by just having a little bit of forward. And especially since we've only probably got a couple of viewers here, this was an unplanned show. And so my forward is talking about Chief Architect moving to the subscription based model, okay? And seeing a lot of people just angry and saying, you know, I'm going to cut out Homedesigner line. I don't want to move to the subscription model. That's it from me. They made a huge mistake. And look, I'm a brand ambassador. I'm going to support Chief Architect and what they do. I'm really happy with the movements that they always make. I'm on a first name basis with I think most of the development team now, and I'm on a first name basis with a lot of people in sales, and I have a keen understanding of what this software is trying to do as a company. I happen to really like the CEO, the president of this company, and I've had many discussions with him. And let me just put this on the screen. As of today's date, this is December 1st. We're going to see something very specific here. Now, the first thing you might notice is, bam, oh, that's way too expensive for Homedesigner. That's $79 a month. And then you look to the left and you see, if I just pay for this annually, this is $33 a month. Yes, you don't own it anymore, but there's a reason for this, and it's a very specific reason. It's one that is hits close to home for me, and I can almost explain it in summation for anybody that is familiar with Vail Resorts, that owns all the ski resorts across the nation, which is that in order for them to understand how they can develop for the year, they need to know what kind of capital that they're working with, right? They need to know what their income is going to be before they allocate resources to do new developments, okay? And it's not like we're operating in a vacuum, right? Chief Architect has subscriptions. They have to pay for software. They have to spend development dollars to just start their development. The softwares that they pay for just to develop are also on subscription models. So there's just this concurrent cost that's happening. And so in order to understand how much we can pump into any version cycle and keep relevant for years to come, especially with the volatility of AI and how many maybe potential new competitors are coming into the market, you need to know what your base numbers are, or you're just kind of operating without really understanding, where you're going to go with this, okay? And Someone's just commenting, Chief is always doing nice updates. I completely agree. And we're going to look at what we've got going on in this home designer line, because I'm seeing a lot of the comments at Home Talk, which is Chief Architect's native forum developed for the home designer users, which is a great community of people, that a lot of people are saying this version's underwhelming. And I think there's more to this than meets the eye. I'm going to find out in this video. So what I'm pointing out here is that build monthly number is for those users that the expectation is this is a homeowner just trying to develop for a single project. And so they're not going to pay for an annual fee, and so we're going to hike up that monthly fee. So if you need the software here and there, you pay $79 for that month. You go develop your project and you stop it, right? You stop paying. That $396, that's getting us new features, $33 a month. Heck, I pay close to $70 a month just for the AI platforms I use. That's twice as much as this software, and this software can design and permit a whole home. So I'm not all that shocked by this. I think that's a really fair fee, tell you the truth, just starting off the bat. I know people are upset about it. You don't own the software anymore. I get that. I understand that. The next thing that I want to bring up, and again, you can just skip forward another 5 minutes. I'll be done talking about this. But the next thing I want to bring up is there is something to be said for hardware and software compatibility. For those users that are saying, I'm stopping with Homedesigner 2025. That's it for me. I don't want to purchase. I don't want to get locked into a subscription. I want to own my software. Please note, please keep this in mind when you're thinking this through and you're talking about a business model or hobbyist model, what have you, is as our hardware grows, it may be that the hardware becomes incompatible with your older software. This is happening right now. Chief Architect Premiere X17, the Intel-based Macs no longer work with that software. So now it's that the software has outgrown the hardware has outgrown the software, right? So consider that. If this is part of your business, if you're using Homedesigner for your business, I'd say keep on with the subscription, because as you utilize other softwares that will then need to take advantage of new hardware, that hardware may render your old software obsolete, no longer functioning on your machine. You don't know. We just saw a forced update to Windows 11. So software that only worked with Windows 10, now you have to work in compatibility mode. And maybe that doesn't even work with new driver packages coming in from graphics cards. So that's part of this equation too, okay? I took a brief look at what's new in Homedesigner 2026, and right off the bat, some key features hit me immediately. One is that it looks like that plan and layouts actually are taking advantage of the new project management. And if they are taking advantage of project management, there may be a way that we can be able to send multiple plans to one layout very easily utilizing that workflow, in which case we've got one plan that's handling the display of layers in one way, and we've got another plan that's handling the display of layers for, say, an electrical plan, which was always complicated in Homedesigner. That's why people stepped up to the Premiere line, because we're able to build out a bunch of different layer sets that are just switchable based on a saved view and a set of settings, okay? Next thing that I noticed right off the bat, you get ray tracing. And I know that's not necessarily something that sells the projects right now, but the industry is moving fast, especially with AI, and people want visuals, and it's becoming an expectation. And so having that ray trace rendering really changes things. The next part of this that I noticed that's really well worth the cost of the Homedesigner line right off the bat is, for first time ever, it looks like you have access to the full catalog of libraries. And I'm surprised that they're saying hundreds of bonus and manufacturer. They're saying hundreds of bonus and manufacturer catalogs. Mind you, what that equates to is tens of thousands of objects. Let me say that again. Tens of thousands of objects. If you were to go online and try to find ray trace optimized low poly count objects, you are going to, on an average, pay $3 per a group of objects that might be 10 objects and it might be one object, okay? We're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of dollars worth of objects developed specifically for this software and developed specifically to make your ray traces look as good as possible straight out of the box. And when we then compare that to the fact that 3D Warehouse, Google's SketchUp 3D Warehouse, has now switched to a model where I believe you need to have a subscription to be able to download more than 3 objects from 3D Warehouse in any given day. So if you need 100 objects, you're not going to find them anywhere else for any cheaper than this. The subscription itself has paid for itself through just that library catalog. Right off the bat, I wouldn't have any problems with this model at all. I'd be like, thank you. I just got access to something I never had access to before, and that's huge. Let's see, let's talk about doors and more. You know, I see some of these other things and yes and no, right? It's a short list, but what I'm curious about is right off the bat, we got something in the Premiere line, and I'd be very surprised if they were able to pull this out of the lower Homedesigner line. And that is that in a 3D view, we get 3D dimensions. So that's the first thing I'm going to check. Now, before I jump in, I want to just tell you, I have difficulty working in the software when I'm not using my hotkeys. And I know traditionally Homedesigner doesn't allow you to edit your hotkeys, but there is the hotkeys XML file, which is the directive for hotkeys that Homedesigner uses, is an editable text file. And so I did go ahead and get what's called Cursor AI, can read files on my machine. I went and got it to look at my XML file on Chief Architect Premiere and compare it to the one on Homedesigner Pro, and it is the exact same XML file. So I'm hoping I get to just load this up and utilize it so I can use my own hotkeys. And so let's do this. We're firing this up. I did the install, so the install is done. This is ready to go, but I haven't done anything else with this. So we'll start from there. And let's see, I got a user here, and I think, do I get to pin this message? Or do I get to show this message? I don't know, pin this message? Sure. Message pin. Cody Starr says hotkeys are everything. Where is that XML file? You can always find where your files are stored in the preferences, and then within folders, and you're going to find where your root data files live. Okay. Now keep in mind, in Homedesigner 2026 and Chief Architect Premiere X17, by default, these are set to use managed mode, which means that we don't necessarily have access to these files right away. So we can see here that this unmanaged data folder is in Homedesigner 2026. If you're on a PC and you want to take a look at where this stuff is, underneath Documents, Homedesigner hotkeys, here's that user hotkeys XML file. It also lives in Program Files, Chief Architect Homedesigner 2026 hotkeys XML file. So it lives in 2 places. Now there is a 50-50 shot that neither of those places are going to load this up because project management is turned on, which means that these resources are managed in a folder location on my machine, and then those files are encrypted and they're not readable by anything that we have. So there is possibly a way around that. Let me first check to see if my hotkeys are even working. So I'm going to start by just doing a new project, and we'll call it test. And let me draw this out and just right click, and yeah, so even though I changed my hotkeys, this is not honoring my change because my open object is just the E key. So yeah, I take the time right now to show you how I might be able to fix this, which would be in project management. I'm going to uncheck use Chief Architect Project Management. It's going to tell me I need to close this existing plan file that I just created, close without saving. Let me try this again. Project management, use Chief Architect, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So now it's not using project management. And so if I do a new plan, this is a different workflow. And does it somehow load my hotkeys? No, it doesn't. But let me close this without saving. Now, if I steal my hotkeys from the Premiere line, Chief Architect, yep, Premiere, and overwrite the program files, and overwrite the document file one. Now, if I open this up, we'll see if it honors those hotkeys or not. Because that would be a big one for me. That would bug me. Okay, so now those hotkeys are enabled. Okay, needed a reboot of the software, overwrite the XML. So now if I go back to preferences and turn on project management, it should carry those hotkeys forward. Oh, and it's going to make me shut this down. Ask me how I know this stuff. I have no idea. I've been trying to break this software since I first got it. So that'll bring me back to this fact that I have this test plan, and let's see if this brought that forward. Yes, now I have my hotkeys. Very cool. So that is a way that you can get hotkeys in. So you can have some AI read from what you would do. I have something to compare hotkeys to. You don't. So what you would do is tools, create hotkey list. And so you would export your hotkeys. Let me make sure this is on the screen fully there. Create hotkey list. You'd export the hotkey list. You'd plug that into AI. You'd say, compare this to this XML file and have it interpolate what key is what, because the XML file is just a list of codes. It's not like it's saying, hey, the wall hotkey is here. So that's what's going on, all right? Okay. And for you super nerds out there, Cody Starr is kind of jumping on this. For you super nerds out there, for me, you can get an AI that can read your file system, like Cursor AI, which is what I just showed I was using. And you can get it to read files such as your mouse and such as your 3D mouse and such as your keyboard, and have it script so that for this particular software, it's updating keys for you. So I can do voice to text and say, hey, make my thumb button control walls, and it'll do that. Pretty clever. All right, now let's get into this. This is the first thing I want to hear see right now is, all right, first of all, continuous draw mode is not enabled on the Homedesigner line. Let me open up Chief Architect X17 Premiere, and this will be the first thing that we are comparing. This is just an immediate thing I noticed. I'm going to open up my own template here. You're going to notice that the Premiere line takes a really long time to load if you've got 5 billion gigabytes of library items. And so bear with me. But all right. Continuous draw mode means I get to right click with the wall tool and left click to continue to draw. I am not clicking to initiate the next wall segment. I am just clicking to, I'm not having to click twice for every wall segment, and it's continuing from the last endpoint of the last wall segment. We do not have that in the in the Homedesigner line. We have to individually click and start our click at every wall segment. Okay, so that's a little different. That's okay. That's been in Homedesigner for a very long time. Let's just throw some windows in here. Let's see what's going on with this. Auto dimensions turn on. I never like seeing the grids, so let me get rid of that. And then let's pull a little 3D view. So the biggest thing, we're going to see if this has this, and I bet you it does. The biggest update is not listed in Homedesigner yeah, see, it has this. This is the biggest upgrade of Homedesigner right here, is if you can get accustomed to drawing in a 3D view, there is nothing better than this, which is, ignore the trial version written across this. I'm not going to pay for this. I've got the Premiere line, but we have 3D temp dimensions, okay? What does that mean? I get to click on this 4'7" and change it to 5'0", all right? and I clicked on the top side of the window, you can see the edit handle there. That's the edit handle. That's the selected edit handle. In fact, first thing I like to do is change my color preferences to make this really clear and easy to see, is that we've got pink selections for everything I'm selecting, and target handle fill will just be turquoise. It'll be really easy to see what I'm selecting here. There we go. Top, bottom of this window. Bam. I get to say, a couple things here. I can say, hey, I want this 3'6", and I want you to move that window so that this entire window is placed at 3'6". Or I can click this little guy right here, and that's going to say, I want to resize this window to make it 3'6". So it's resizing the window to make this 3'6". This is such a workflow improvement. I can't tell you how much time you are going to save by utilizing this. I'm going to use a 3D mouse, kind of pull into this interior view. Let me just throw a cabinet in here, and let me throw a cabinet here. I'll show you why this is so impactful. We are going to see right off the bat, if I select this edge, I'm going to mess with these dimension defaults because it's not picking up everything that I would like to pick up. So this should show kind of cabinet to cabinet. It will once I get this close enough. So that's what we're looking at here, 1'1". I get to just zero this out. And now I know my cabinet is bumped. Doesn't get any better than that. Just going to pull out a copy, set this to 0. Now I know my cabinet's bumped or turned on. There we go. I get to pull this out, set this to 0, right? I get to click on this edit handle, click on this 2. I want a 3-foot cabinet. This is so much better than what it used to be in all prior versions. If you can get accustomed to working in 3D, this is going to save you so much time. How many times have you done this? How many times have you come into a wall cabinet and wished you could figure out what the height is to the ceiling? And so we get to click here, click 0, tab, hit space, hit enter, and I resize the cabinet and it's flush to the ceiling. That is such an improvement in the software. I can't even tell you. So I'm glad you guys got this. The catalog downloads, and ray tracing should give you everything you need to know about this. Rendering techniques, physically based rendering. Let's look at the technique options. If you have a compatible NVIDIA card, you'll want to check on this guy when you're live designing. It's going to circumvent these maximum samples here. Let me actually throw in, we're going to up this value here, maybe the automatic exposure up a little bit too. Setting this to DLSS, if you have a compatible NVIDIA card, means that we get to just roam around in a live ray traced view, right? Throw a little terrain perimeter in there. Why not? Let me start making this look like what I really want it to look like, which is updating, maybe some of these materials, etc. With the new project management function comes a new asset manager. For the asset manager, you should be able to take this material adjustment tool, get into the texture panel, and you're going to notice something here. It's called import. We could select, and that's going to bring us to the asset management dialog where we can choose something from our existing user-based catalog, or I could click on import instead and go target something from my own catalog of materials, where I might have landscaping materials such as a really good looking grass material that I created a long time ago. Perhaps patchy grass. So I'm going to just pull in this diffuse map here. It looks like this is interesting. In the define material, it does not look like you have a mixed material class. So that's too bad. We're not getting bump maps. So even though you're getting ray tracing, you're not getting things that designate height. You're not getting things that designate an amount of roughness. Maybe you are. Maybe it's that I was trying to update an existing material. So let me give this a shot real quick. Let me see if I can get into the 3D menu. And let's just go plan materials for now. Let's see if I can create a new material. Do we get any roughness material stuff? No. So you're not going to get materials that look truly 3D. That's just that seems to be what that is. That's going to be limited to the Premiere line. And I'll show you what we're talking about there. So let me switch to the Premiere line. And let me just check out our, do we have any comments here? Hey, Cody. Why you are high on 3D design. Say that again. Tab space. Oh, I'll tell you the tab space again. Sure, certainly. Someone mentioned me talking about tab space, but let me finish drawing this really weird house in the Premiere line and just show you with the adjust material tools in the Premiere line, you can notice that the grass looks a lot more 3D. And so part of what this is that we've got a texture here where we have the ability to input things such as a bump map or normal map. You can look these terms up online, but without this bump map, which is what's going on in the HD line, we're just losing that depth. And then it's just going to be a flat two-dimensional texture is what's happening there. So I'm curious if there's some kind of workaround. Maybe. You can fake some amount of depth. Possibly. I'll show you a way that you could do that. Let me see if I can do this in the roof directive. If I get into this structure panel, let's see so in the Premiere line, we have a much different looking structure panel. Premiere line, we're able to define our surface, our structure, our ceiling. So somehow this is getting defined in some other way. It seems that the rafter and truss depth get defined right in here. And surface is what I'm curious about. It doesn't seem like we can layer our top surface. So that's interesting. Okay. Also missing a number of different extrusion profiles that we have in the Premiere line. Premiere line, we have extrusion profiles for shadow boards where we can put in some kind of like Z flashing or counter flashing. We can put in gutter profiles, which, I mean, this roof has a gutter, so I'm wondering if there's some way to designate that. We can put in ridge cap profiles. We can put in a number of different things. Let's see. Crazy profiles. How are we getting this gutter profile? Oh, supply gutter. Is that really all it is? Press OK. Interesting. So it's just a gutter profile that you have no control over, it seems. If we get into a library browser, let's see, can we add CAD molding profiles to our library browser? That would be my question. Can I just do something like this? That there is no add to library button, so we cannot create a profile. Can you import one from the Premiere line would be my next question. I'm always curious what can be brought in from the Premiere line. So actually I have some gutter profiles in here already. Just take a look real quick. And so I'm going to export this from the Premiere line. And we're going to just take a look back at my File Explorer. And we'll go find that. And I'm just going to drag and drop this in here. Library is completed successfully. One item has been updated. There we go. There's that gutter profile. Now can I hover over this and click and replace? Look at that. That's pretty cool. There are reasons to have friends in the Premiere line. I don't know if you can do this in any other way. So, yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe some experienced HDPro users know how to add a CAD profile to the library. It just doesn't seem like that's an option, at least not from the plan view. There doesn't seem to be a CAD to view menu, which would be in the Premiere line, where we can take any view and convert it to CAD. So that's something where you might just need to, purchase a catalog from someone if you want a bunch of different extrusion profiles that are swappable inside of the software. So this is kind of elevating the function of this software with a couple of tricks that we know. Yeah, someone in the comments, I mean, people that, Cody that's in the comments right now, he has the Premiere line. And and so we know the obvious reasons that we have to have the Premiere line. We're professionals. We do a number of drafting jobs throughout the year. I'm like in the couple hundred. And so I have to have the Premiere line. But that's not to say we can't make the HT line do things that we want it to do in the lower line. Let's see what else we can force into here. I have another, I wanted to check on macros. So I've got this object info macro. It seems to have imported just fine. I might get to place this. That seems to be working just fine. If I get to plug this, there is no automatic leader from text. We usually have a diamond. If you want to see what this looks like in Chief Architect, if I type something here, I get to select that text and I get this diamond, and that diamond can pull out a leader, okay? And so we don't have that in the Homedesigner. All right, so you have to use the leader tool, and I'm imagining that is maybe line with arrow. So if I plug this into a window, look at that. So macros do function in the Homedesigner line. These are all the reported published values coming out of just this window alone, okay? So what can you do with stuff like that? I believe in Homedesigner, you have to go through display options to kind of toggle some things such as window labels, right? So if I want to turn on window labels, we can see what these labels are. And so let's see if we can modify this and make it the way that I just feel like I want to make it, right? We can do some kind of conditional statements here. So this would be width, and we can see in the preview on the side here that is in fact reporting width, and it's reporting it in its measurement class. So I'm going to say that this is to a float instead, and then we're going to round that float. And so that's what we're looking at. And so I could do then height, and same thing. Oops. So height to F. And so that would be, oh, let's see. That's just 32 by 52. So we'd need to do a little bit more to format this in foot and inches. We'd have to do what's called the div mod or something like that. But I know it's capable. The other thing that we might look at is probably type code, and that gets us the handing. I do see that you do not have any positioning for the labels. So there's no way to offset that label like I typically would. So that's where, if you want to just use the automatic label, here's what I would do, is enter, 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 and then, I know that sounds funny, and then automatic label. And so this is pushing this to one side of that window. It's pushing it to the inside of the window, which I don't want. So I'd actually would do the inverse, which is grab all these spaces and put it on the other side of the window. There we go. Now that's offset from the window. So notice that there's a fill style in here. So I'm wondering if there's text style management in the text menu, and there isn't. So here, this brings me to another feature that we have in the Premiere line, which is we can customize toolbars. Let's look to see if there's the new tool search, because this is gonna, and we do have this. I'm gonna drag this onto my toolbars, and now I should be able to see whether or not we do have text style defaults. I have no idea where that lives officially, but you have access to it, which is very cool. If it's not in the menu, that's a fantastic hack. Sorry, Chief Architect. I'm showing you functions that might only be in the Premiere line via the tool search, which they haven't necessarily locked out. So that's pretty cool. Which means I can create some new copy of the default label style and say no fill and check transparent, and then change what the window label is reporting to. And how do we do that? We probably have to do that up here, display options, window label, and change that to default label style no fill. And there we go. I got rid of the fill on that label. Pretty slick. And now to answer Cody, what I was saying is if I wanted to, there are certain elements in Chief Architect which by default, when you click on a 3D dimension, that when you specify some new dimension, and it's outside of the bounds of the object, so these right here, right? By default, this is set to move. So if I want to very quickly with only my keyboard set this to resize, not move, I could say 3'6" tab, and you'll see the tab highlighted the resize part. Hit space, hit enter. So that's what I was saying very, very quickly earlier on, is that's just a way to set this up very quickly and have that input without having to mouse over to something. Another element by default that is the inverse of windows and cabinets would be the backsplash tool. So if I click in custom backsplash and I draw this in here, because the reason I might do this is that I have no breaks. If I were to draw a backsplash here, it's going to automatically have these breaks. See those breaks there, right? So sometimes I'll draw a backsplash just to get an unbroken square. And so then if I select that edit handle and click on this 9, notice that by default, resize is checked as opposed to move. So I just get to hit 0 and it's going to resize. Hit 0, it's going to resize. Oops, it didn't seem to resize now, did it? There we go. Same thing, last part, resize. So that works well enough. This is interesting. Notice that this floor definitely has a bump or roughness map or both. So this is just something that Chief Architect built, but you're locked out of. So really you want to use their materials, bringing in your own materials. The thing that you might be able to do is change out the texture and utilize the bump map in this case. So you're going to want to find things that are already built with bump maps to give some texture depth in order to utilize them. What would be an example of this? I'll show you. If we get into the, I did not download the catalogs, so I'm going to be missing the core catalogs. Install core content. We can get that started. So an example of this would be that I can go find one of the stucco patterns and it's going to have a bunch of dimpled texture. And so I could use that because it's got that baked in. It's there, we just don't have access to it. So I can use that just to change the texture map and utilize the bump from the stucco that's already in the catalogs. So you can still get some elevated stuff here. So for my grass that I just built outside, I'm going to go look at the core content when it's done downloading, and we'll go grab a stucco texture, and then we'll convert that to grass, and we'll see that maybe that works for what we need. Yeah, what other things? You can add cabinets to the library. That's good. You can build out a catalog. There are no style palettes. So let's see if we can bring in a style palette from the Premiere line, because that's a big one. Let me just do my garbage pullout painter. Now, style palette is where we can take a certain set of parameters and just apply those parameters as if we're using, let's see, does the Homedesigner line have an object eyedropper tool? Yes, it does. So it's a similar function to the object eyedropper, yet we get to save it to our catalog and also even attach it to a toolbar item. So if you go to customize toolbars and you go to place library object, you should be able to drag this into place. So I'm going to put it right next to my custom tool search. That creates a new toolbar. Great, cool. This creates a new toolbar, custom toolbar right there is what it created. I can enable this in plan and elevation, and then I get to associate this with something in my library. Now I'm going to export from the Premiere line garbage painter, for instance, and let me bring that into Homedesigner and see if it'll let me. Okay. And it says that it's limited. It cannot be used in this version. So there you go. There's the answer to that. We can't use style palette tools, and it's going to bug me until I get rid of it. I'll get rid of it. Don't worry. In previous versions, I did find a workaround for bringing in schedules, and that was via a cross-section camera where you needed to have the Premiere line build it out for you. I'm not going to test that in this version. I don't think we've got time. I do want to keep on task and keep talking about what the Homedesigner line is bringing, and I still want to kind of come back to the new feature changelog and take a closer look at this. So I know that you guys got rope lighting. That's nice. Library catalog. Having software security assurance is where you get to call Chief Architect and get answers to your questions, and they'll help you through it, and they're really good at it. So that right there, that's an awesome feature, especially for someone trying to learn the software. I'm surprised they offer that, especially for someone that is not in the profession doing their own. That's a money well spent right there. You'd have to let me know if that's pay by the hour or if that's just included. I'd want to know that. There, yeah, view resolution. So the project browser is going to be something very new to anybody in the Homedesigner line. This is where we have the ability to add additional files here, as well as make a copy of files. It's not going to allow me to do this because I'm in the trial version. That's fine. And then you're able to export this as a project where it contains all of the assets within the project file. This means any materials you had in your file, if you want to share them back and forth to someone else, this is a way to do that. If you have PDFs, if you have Excels, these are static things that you are going to remain unchanged, but you get to share them with a colleague or something like that via this project workflow. So this becomes a really cool way to manage your stuff, especially if we get integrated cloud sharing later on in the future, so that you're sharing to another license holder by their email, and there is no sending files back and forth. They will just exist in their project browser, is the thought there. So if I click on add new folder, folder is essentially a tag system. This is a tag. So if we were to go and create a new plan or a new project, again, called test 2, I could take test 1 and test 2, drag them to this is a tag, and then let's go create a new project to test 3, and test 3 has not been tagged, so that if I click on this tag, guess what it's showing me? Just test 1 and test 2, because this is a tag and it's limiting to just that tag until I cross it off and it shows me the rest. That's pretty cool. Now, if I were to go close some of these views out and I'm trying to find which project I have open right now, there's a button down here that just says, hey, just show me the files that are open. And then this plan and layout templates, if I don't want to see that, I can just click this button here and that's going to hide the view of that as well. So a couple of cool new tricks here. I have a whole video about Project Browser. You can go check it out on the YouTube channel. And so this is going to be a very new workflow for people. If you're sharing across a team and you're trying to share with colleagues via something like Dropbox, then what you would typically do is you would go export, or what's even faster than export, you would go delete. And what it's going to do is give you the option to export and delete. Now I can't do that, there's a trial version, but it would delete that test 3, it would export test 3, that would show up in my Dropbox file where someone else has access to it. That becomes the most up-to-date version. Anything that I then had in my project browser is some static copy that is outdated. So important to note that this is going to be a very new workflow for some people. Let's see, someone is, let me pin this if I can. Let me pin this little guy, replace pinned message. New pinned message, please, how do you fix dimension inaccuracy for interior space for floor plan? I would love to know more about what you're talking about there, what you're referring to there in terms of inaccuracy. Right now, this is the default dimension control is dimensioning to the outer side of the main layer, which would be, in the case of this is wood framing construction, North America, this is a 2x6 house or 2x4 house, something like that. So this is going to the outside. Now, if I double click a dimension string, typically in the Premiere line, this gets us to our dimension defaults. Double clicking it here just gets me to some dimension line specification. If I double click the manual dimension tool, that does get me to dimension defaults. And so if I'm looking at locate auto exterior, we can see that this is dimensioning to the wall dimension layer, primary side only, primary side on the interior side as well. You can change these. Now, when we get to format, this is where we're going to designate how accurate we need this to be. So if you need this accurate down to 4 decimal places, that's where you would specify this. Keep in mind, it's recommended to do grid rounding, but in the Homedesigner line, it does not look like you have access to even change that setting. So by default, this will be set to grid rounding, which means that if you're off just a little bit, it's because it's picking up a grid, and that's more to do with splitting fractions across paper space, and that's kind of a complex thing to understand. So if you need better accuracy, you can set this down to a smaller fraction. I don't imagine you would want it at a smaller fraction than that. And then we do have the option in our format in the Premiere line to put a leading or a trailing plus or minus something is just a little bit more than this lowest common denominator, which is set as the smallest fraction there, right? So if you're having some kind of other discrepancy using these tools, I would say just mess around with your dimension defaults. Now, I like to be able to switch dimension defaults, and we have that ability in the Premiere line. I'm going to go ahead and see if we have a active dimension default window, and you do not. So if you want to change dimension defaults, there's no way to build out other dimension defaults. You only get one in the Premiere line. Excuse me, in the Homedesigner line. In the Premiere line, we can choose any number of dimension defaults that we want. So in this case, this is where it's useful to use the different dimension types. Whereas in the Premiere line, we really only need to use the manual dimension tool because we change what the dimension defaults are set up for, okay? So for me, if I'm designing something like this, I'm gonna start off with, you're basically gonna be doing your dimensions in order of operations. So you start with your exterior side and then change your defaults. So I would say in terms of locate manual, I don't want to see cabinets. I don't want to see CAD objects. I don't want to dimension to any of this stuff. The only thing that I want to dimension to in this case is I don't even want to dimension to openings if I can. So I might be able to set my reach to something really low, like 6 inches. And then under locate manual, I want to see primary and secondary side and display wall widths. And then on the exterior, I want to show secondary side. So this is, now I'm using the manual dimension tool to just swipe through here to get interior dimensions really, really quickly without having to worry about all the other junk it would try to pick up if it was dimensioning to cabinets. Okay, now I want to do a different view where I'm going to copy my existing plan and I'm going to do, you know, the cabinet version, right? And we'll open up the cabinet version and, well, that was supposed to make a copy. I'm on a trial version, it's not going to let me make a copy. But that's where I would change my dimension defaults, locate manual, back to showing cabinets, sides, corners, and maybe I would do fixture centers and be able to draw this through to get those dimension defaults, right? So a couple different ways to do that. Let's see if you have the delete dimension tool. You do. You have the delete dimension tool. Isn't that cool? So a couple things I would do to modify just to kind of supercharge your workflow here. Add the delete dimensions right next to the dimensions there. This is a really fast and easy way to delete all dimensions, including auto refresh dimensions in case you want to change your settings. All right, so that's quick and easy. I would say something that is a cool thing to add here as well would be, let's go with layer hider, layer painter. Let's see if they have that. We do not. So in the Premiere line, we're able to click on a layer and it hides that layer. Everything that's associated with that layer, it will hide it. And then Layer Painter does the inverse of that. We get to choose a layer that we want to apply to some object. So it does not seem that we have those capabilities. Let's just take a brief look at everything that you've got here. And let me think about some things that I might add to the toolbars to help kind of improve the function of this software. Cabinet tools, obviously you're going to have a drop-down menu for that. I always think curve wall tools are very redundant. If you didn't know that, you can take a wall like this, right-click it, it will curve. You right-click and move its edit handle. That's the same for lines. So if we use the line tool and just right-click the edge handle, there you go. You're curving it. Very easily, I might add. Bam. Super easy to do that. Same thing with your arrows and your leaders. Let's just say you're going to drop in some text. You do not have the standard text tool. That's interesting. That makes sense. Okay. So the rich text, you're going to drop in rich text, type out whatever. By the way, I want you to note I just hit enter and that put a new line break. Okay. There might be a setting in Homedesigner that says under the text panel, create new line from enter. I'm going to say, no, I don't want to do that. What does that do for me? I'll show you right now. Rich text, type whatever. I'm about to hit enter. What happens? Closes the dialog box. It's way more efficient. If you didn't know it, another thing that the enter button does is instead of, here's your edit toolbar down at the bottom of the screen. Instead of hitting tab, which would give you next object, you could hit enter instead, and it does the same thing. So if you want to be really clever, you could bind your enter key to the side of your mouse, and that will serve to be a lot of different functions. Okay, so enter will select next object. Enter will do, oh, you do not have tab input, which is one of the biggest crimes ever in the Homedesigner line. We'll talk about it in just a second. But also enter will give us closing this dialog box. If I wanted to hit a new line break, I'd have to hold control and hit enter, and that gets me a new line break. Okay. And so then let's get into line with arrow. Draw this out, right click, and you can curve that leader. Very cool. And you might be able to learn some macros that are stored internally that you don't know about. And that would pick up stuff like automatic label if there was one, but most walls don't have that. It's not reporting any automatic label, but I bet you the window is. Or maybe the roof plane is. Oh, that's the roof plane. Tab input. This is one of those things where I couldn't deal without it. this is the reason for an upgrade to the Premiere line, which is the closest thing you're getting to it is the 3D temp dimensions. Tab input means I can drop a cabinet in here, copy paste, drag the center edit handle, and hit tab or enter and input my dimensions. So I'm moving everything precisely. So the difference really in Homedesigner that we can't do that is I can't specifically move this. But the dimensions are set up in a way that, you know what? It's not as bad now, especially if you're doing things in a 3D view and you're getting used to that 3D view. Yeah, ouch, no tab input. Yeah, that one's tough for me, but I could just deal with doing 3D view. I think I could. You might want to set up a different text default for the time when you want to change what these temporary dimensions looks like, but this is actually pretty good. I think that's very workable. Let me get back to customizing toolbars here. Delete surface. That's interesting that you have that, because I don't believe you have convert selected to symbol. We do not. So that's interesting that there's a delete surface tool. I'm not sure what the use case would be for that. That's typically used when we want to remove some geometry and then convert that selected geometry to some other symbol. So do we have the ability to export a 3D file? Oh, wow. Okay. This changes things. Let me give you an example of how this can get used. This test 2 plan, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to what do we have here? We have slab with footing. We have we'll do an example. I'm going to look through the library browser for just a dishwasher. And I'll show you how this can get utilized. I'm going to try to find real quick just one with a handle. There we go. Okay. Now let me pull a 3D view on this, and I'm going to use the delete surface tool, which is right here, delete surface, and I'm going to delete all these surfaces. Now, this might be cumbersome. I don't know if you have the 3D panel of this object. No, you do not. So this is a little cumbersome to use. Notice that the surfaces just came back. That's because the 3D got rebuilt. But effectively, if you were really patient or you got lucky with the object you were trying to delete surfaces from, if you wanted to do something like remove some geometry that wasn't mapped correctly or coming in from 3D Warehouse or something like that, you could then, let's just remove this kick plate too, parts of it anyways. You could then, not going to get a convert, you could then export this as a DAE file. Okay. It's not going to let me do it because it's on a trial version, but then when I re-imported that object, it would no longer have the handle. And so it's going to remain this way until it rebuilds the 3D, which is me just opening it and closing it. So delete surface tool is a pretty cool addition. Like I said, there's a lot of things that just don't show up on the changelog when you look at the new features list. It's just not going to be there, but there are changes in here. Has Homedesigner, here's a comment, I'm going to pin this. Has Homedesigner made this, an affordable option for designing your own home? I think so. I mean, if you're some savant with learning softwares and you can learn this and build your house in a month, I know there's people that are capable of doing that. That's $80 to go design your house and dang near at least get something to bid off of, let alone some jurisdictions in North America will still take napkin sketch stuff. Some some places don't even do plan review. You hold 100% of the liability, and then you just have to pass building inspections. So, and there's certainly parts of North America where you could get away with just paying $79 and designing your house. That's a good question. All right, let's talk about what else there is here. I'm fairly certain they still haven't given schedules. Yes. I think it's great that you can customize your toolbars because there's definitely some value adds you can bring in here. Let me look at it from the inverse side. For those of you that really want this video to be a true comparison of the Premiere line versus, this lower line, is that in the Premiere line, we have these really robust ways of saving a bunch of different parameters that can quite literally take you years to develop in an efficient way. And just to show you, this is pretty much from scratch drawing right here. Let me just, actually, I'll close this down and I won't even save it. Just this off and I'll open it up again. So from just a bare bones minimum thing where I'm using a template where I have a bunch of saved settings here, I can say that, this is my as-built drawing. I'm going to be in a remodel workflow where I'm doing a remodel, and maybe this is going to be a ridiculous model. It's not actually going to represent anything that's true, right? But let's just say I've got a garage there, and I've got garage door, etc. And so this is going to become my as-built. So I get to come in here and replace my as-built file, which is already being sent to a layout, which, the Homedesigner line only has one layout, and you only have one layer set, which is the parameters for what layers are turned on. For instance, electrical, roof plane, etc. Okay, so I'm going to replace with what I have drawn here. And then I'm going to continue to draw in this plan file some addition. And I'll even call it as such in room type, okay? Now when I go open up any of my 10 layouts that are already pre-established with settings for different drawing types, and I start scrolling through here, we're going to notice that this is calculating lot analysis. It's calculating percentage of coverage. It's showing design load criteria. It's, as I pump through, it's got a plot plan already established that I only have to do some minimum work to. It has my as-built is shown here. Next page is going to show my addition here. Come up and we see that it's got a roof plan established. I need to only update some views to see that it's already got elevation cameras established and saved and pre-sent to this layout. And then keep scrolling through this, and it's got some elevated stuff with schedules. It's got some CAD detail parameters where it's got fixture schedules that are going to report from the kitchen. I keep going, and you're going to see, this is where my cabinet schedules usually show up. Here's my window and door schedules being populated with a bunch of advanced things that I need in certain jurisdictions where we need to see energy values and Title 24 calculations and show existing versus new, and show an overview of where those windows are installed, and I get to pan and scale. We'll see if this is capable in the Homedesigner line, but I get to pan and scale this view just to be able to fit on the screen on the fly, and then keep going. And we see I've got a foundation view already established. We've got a braced wall panel view, especially if I go and back and frame this project and I don't want to see the layers of that framing, because the layers of that framing are going to be sent to other views that show this, right? And so there's my whole roof plan framed out. Here's a bunch of CAD details that are already shown and are dynamically linked to information. So there's a bunch going on in the Premiere line that we know that the Homedesigner line doesn't have. But if you're not designing in California and this isn't your full-time job, there's no reason we can't utilize the Homedesigner line to build out construction documents. It is more work. But if you're only doing 2 or 3 projects a year, what's more work for that? Especially if you're just someone that's designing their own home. You've only got one project here. Are you really saving by going to the Premiere line? Probably not. Let's take a look at what the layout is capable of. I don't eat or sleep anymore. You know, I've got a problem that I gotta go see a doctor about, and it's kept me grounded. And yeah, I got nothing better to do but talk to you yahoos in the comments. All right, we got layout. What can it do? We don't know. We don't know. Obviously, we can send, you know, I updated my hotkeys, so that's just awesome that I get to do that. Send this to page 1, quarter inch scale, entire plan view. Yep, okay, sure. Let's see what function this has. Do we have pan scale layout? No, we don't. That's too bad. That's a cool feature. We also do not have relink to view. So because and that makes sense, because we have all these different layer sets in the Premiere line where we get to set up a view for specifically for electrical, we get to set up a view specifically for just our plan view or typical floor plan view. We get to set one up for NKVA. That's the reason we have a relink tool where we could take something like this, which is a layout box that's sent to view, and I can relink it to some different view. And not only that, but I can paste and hold the position of this view. If we use copy paste, you do in fact have paste hold position. So if I switch to the page and I go paste hold position, it's going to paste in the exact XY coordinate. And you can figure that out if you get into points and get into place point. And so I'm going to place a point at the corner of this building. And if I go to the previous page, there we go. That point is in the exact same place. So that's the point of doing paste hold position. So we have things aligned from one page to the next. But the reason we use link then is we're pasting hold position, and then we've got a layer set built out specifically for this that then we want it to be in the exact true position. So we just get to swap the view out by relinking. The difference here, and something that I can't show you because this is just a limit of the trial version, is I would make a copy of this plan, change the layer sets to show just electrical, send it, and then do a point-to-point move, which you do have the point-to-point tool, and be able to point-to-point the corner of this building to the temporary point that I place. Temporary points do not print, so this would be a method to align layer sets from two different buildings. Let me see if I open test 1 up and we've got this building and we do a restrictive selection. Let's see if there are restrictive selections. There are. So if you choose the straight wall tool and you hold shift and you marquee over this, it will only select walls, so that if I then do a copy paste, can I open up test 2 and do a paste hold position? Yes, I can. That makes this very quick and easy for me to be able to set this up for an electrical layer set where I now want to hide things such as the roof plane. So an electrical layer set, let me get into the electrical tools. I'm going to put a light in the view, some lights in the view. Let's get rid of, in this layer set, oh, where are we at? Display options. There is no search. That's too bad. Maybe we can click into one of these names and then type out RO. That's a way you can kind of search. At least it skips ahead to where the roof planes are. I'm going to uncheck the display of this. Now what do I get to do with this? I get to send this to that page 2, right? Same scale. Now here's my electrical setup, right? Where is, oh, this is sending to its own layout. We're going to want to slide this over to this other project. Yeah, sure, we'll save it. Press OK, it's not going to let me save it. Okay, I'm going to delete that test 2. Is this going to let me bring this over here? No, I don't want to save it. How about that? Is it going to give it to me? Maybe not. All right, so let's start from this test copy then instead. Paste hold position. There we go. Now let's send this to layout. Page 2. Okay, so there is this guy is sent to layout. Let me go mess around with this. This is the one where I'm going to drop in some electrical. Bing, 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 bing. And then same thing, we're going to go to that display options, click in here, type in roof as fast as you can, uncheck the display of that, and it should be that this is updated. It is. So then we would just take this and do a little point to point. And so this is how we're managing layers in this version, is you have to have a copy of the plan. I don't know of any other way to do this. But as you're flipping through this, there you go. There's my cabinet plan, construction plan. I'm going to change the dimension default here for this electrical plan. Now this is my MEP plan. We can use the delete dimension tool, double click the dimension to get to dimension defaults where we're unchecking absolutely everything but electrical. And we want to show secondary side. We don't even want to see. There we go. Electrical. I probably want, in the Premiere line, we get electrical to centers. It doesn't look like you're going to get that here unless you go to, it doesn't seem to have a center line dimension tool either. You don't have a center line dimension tool. Do we have the ability to automatically select centers? No, we do not. So you don't have a center line tool. That is what it is. So if I use the manual dimension tool now and draw through this, that is picking up center line of the fixtures though. Look at that. Bam. So yeah, this is how we're building out a construction dock this way. Curious skeptic. Oh no, did I do this? The cabinet is named Facebook business name. I'm not sure what you're saying there. Didn't know you were doing a video. Oh, wait. Hey, man. Thanks, JT. That's very nice of you. You need any great CBDG and tincture info for sleep? Nice. It's been so tough sleeping, man. I can't even tell you. It's really tough sleeping. I'm running on fumes right now. I appreciate it. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That's nice. Oh. I wish we had some home designer people in here. I didn't schedule this. That's the problem. ADD, my bad. Should have scheduled it. You guys would be in here and asking all kinds of fun questions, I'm sure. Because there's a lot of things that the Premiere line does that this can't do. But I bet you, because I have such a knowledge of the Premiere line, I bet you I can get a lot of this function with various tricks in this line. I could show you how to make mantles out of cabinets and stuff like that, or one of my favorites here. You home designer users, check this out. Let's just do a little exercise in doing some kind of advanced tutorial stuff here. Is you don't always need the 3D solid tool. You got a great building block here just in the kitchen cabinet tools. So one thing we can do is just let's pull that toe kick out, 0 inch. Let's set this to a blank area. And we can just get rid of this drawer. So now we just got a box with 4 sides and a top, right? And so countertop thickness, let's make this 3.5. What does that look like? Kind of like a brick top. What if we made the height of this be something like, I don't know, 10 feet, right? What's this starting to look like already? Let's go to the moldings profile. Let's add new. Let's see what we've got in our BM01. Do we have base moldings? No, they're not calling it BM, I guess. Molding profiles, base moldings. Oh, BM01 doesn't exist. BM03 does. There we go. Do we get to designate things? Yes, we do. So this becomes base molding profile, right? The height of which could be something like 8 inches or 12 inches or something that looks like a footing, right? Kind of looks like a footing now. In the materials panel, can we change that base molding material to concrete? Let's see. Sure, looks like it. Some kind of concrete. Cool. Now that's concrete. Sweet. Front, you don't have a front sides back. In the Premiere line, we can control all sides of cabinet box. In the Homedesigner line, you can only control the front side. So that's too bad. But we can make this brick and we make this a top, and that would be the lower half of fireplace chute, right? Let's just say the width of this is 6 foot, something like that, okay? And then kind of the same thing is, let's just go pull a 3D view on this. And if we just copy pasted this, brought it up, and let's select this and choose that 10 inches, make it 0, bam, sits it right on top of the other one. We can then, yep, we can concentrically resize. That's cool. Should be able to, do we get to select next side? Select next side, that's a new addition for you guys. This is a really cool thing, especially if you're gonna get used to working in 3D. That means you get to select the next selectable face, including top and bottom. Makes it really easy to move things in 3D. So I'm gonna shrink this down, concentrically resize this. Oh, you even get concentric jump. Look at this. That's a new feature as well. You might not have known about. So set concentric jump distance, I'm just going to set it to 3. That means if I drag one handle, it should concentrically resize the other side as well. If I had it turned on, there we go. There, now that moved that 3 inches about both sides. And then if you just had a square sink in your library browser, sink, and then classified it as a fixture, and you have limiters there, fixtures interior, some kind of, and then add in undermount. Boy, I don't like the way they arrange this. I usually like to put my filter results over on the side. You can always control panel wheel up here. I believe that you still have Boolean operators, so you should be able to go toy not KOH and get toilets that are not Kohler in here, right? Especially with the search online checked. So yeah, you do get Boolean operators here. That's cool. And you can go backtrack to previous undermount sink. And maybe I should have chosen square, but look at this. Should be able to just click there. This is starting to look like a fireplace stack. I don't know if you can tab into this and resize it, but it looks like you can. So, I mean, that's close enough, right? Apply some brick to this. Remove that base molding now. You could add molding at the top there. Look for some brick texture. Do you guys get the 3D material tool? No, you do not. Okay. And then we can classify material as a type, as a limiter. So we'll get some brick from the catalogs, just like this, brown brick, maybe this guy. Yeah. Look how cool that's looking. Look, here's the row lock one. You can, oh, you know what? It's automatically doing it anyways. Right? Pretty slick. Pretty slick. Cool, cool, cool. What do we got in the comments? Let's see. Anytime, buddy. Yeah, I do appreciate it. Thank you. JT donated $10 to me. That'll pay. I'm gonna go get a little coffee in the morning. Yeah, I should have posted it in that Homedesigner forum. Maybe I will after the fact, right? Yeah, they just, Cody's right. They just remove the GUI. A lot of the stuff's there. Oh, I know. We were going to return back to the thought that maybe we get to use a stucco texture to build grass, right? So let's go look at, because they have some good stucco textures. If they're built with, if you see, look at that, see? It's built with a bump map. You can see what's happening there. I would not use the cat face. Pebble Dash might work. What else would they have? They might have fur. Yeah. See, the fur would be a good candidate. I think there's a bump map in that. It looks like. Having access to the catalogs is just huge. You have all the building blocks that you need. So look at this. I'm going to apply fur. If it does in fact have, it's interesting. It almost looks like it's a missing texture. This might be because it's a trial version. Let's take a look. What's happening here? Does this have bumpness to it? Sometimes you gotta roll this around in a 3D view to get an idea. You have to have a compatible card to be able to see this ray tracing too. Let me expand this to kind of see. If we got rid of the fur cap, what's left over? Yeah, there is some bumpness in here. I might stick with the stucco instead. So let me apply the stucco. That's interesting. It's not showing. It doesn't seem to be showing up for me. If I apply it to this wall. Oh, I have blend width turned on. I don't know how that happened. I certainly didn't mean to do that. All right, now it should show up. There we go. So let's try that fur now. That's what was happening. Huh. Fur is still underwhelming. Not sure what's going on with that. Okay, so there's a bump map in this stucco. We can see that. There's height there. So utilizing this, then replacing the texture from my own assets might get me to something that looks a little bit more 3D, and it does. And then we can scale this up. Just go 90-90. And there we go. We're getting to a better looking shot just by utilizing what's there. So that's pretty slick. Cool. What else we got here? Let's go look at this change list here. Pin recent files, I actually like this as a feature. I typically, what you get to do in the project browser is if you build out your typical project, you can then just copy that project. So we just get to make a copy of this test file. And so now I just have a new copy to work from. So if we blanked this out, if we deleted all the elements inside, but it had all the settings that I wanted, then I'm starting from that version, and that saves me time, and I can improve my workflow that way. And so then I don't need to see those common documents, and so I can pin things like this test plan. I can pin that to the start. You can also pin a project as well. So I can pin this so that this is always showing up at the top of my project list. But what we're talking about is if I close all views and I got back to the dashboard, I can take test 2, for example, right? Let's get back to dashboard. And you can, over here, if you hover over this, you get to just pin this guy. And now he's at the top of this, all right? So that's what that's talking about. Drag and drop saved views directly from the project browser to your layout page. I do like that. I think they're going to expand on that functionality. So if I have the layout open and I've got some particular view on here, attic level, Let's see. It's more about having maybe a cross section established. We can just drag and drop onto layout, and that's pretty cool. Man, it's really cool that I got all these Premiere users in here. How's it going? Let's see. I see there's a PDF with an exact item by item comparison, Homedesigner versus Chief. I've seen those before, but it's very different when you get someone like me looking at it from the perspective of how do I get these things from the Premiere line to work in the Homedesigner line? Because I can make some of this stuff work, especially if we actually saved a plan view from. But you know, just knowing that there is a macro management console in there, even though you don't have access to it, it's there. You can script macros, you can script inline macros, you can import objects that carry with them macros to do a bunch of these additional functions, where you can even fake schedules just by creating rich text, essentially. You know, you would just do a lineup of rich text where you're reporting certain things to that rich text variable. Let's do a for example. For example, where did I just put that? I have no idea. I put it in there somewhere. But now I'm gonna go, oh shoot, I'm on a layout. That's what's half my problem here. Let's try this again. For example, example. And that'll just be one line, and we'll just do example 2. And we're going to say window 1 with, I can spell, I know I can. Like, why do I still feel like I'm not used to that font? I don't like this font. And that's what it looks like. It's not very helpful. But if we're to go open this up and say in the label that we're going to show automatic label, and then we're going to say example equals width, and maybe we'll do a little colon and bank to show nothing at all. Look what happens in our reported value. Our label stays the same, reported value gets improved. Let me continue this. Is example, and not spell, 2 equals blank, right? Oh, blank, percentage sign. There we go. So we're building a window schedule. Pretty cool. You might even be able to go something like that. Without a schedule, there's no way a window has any kind of enumeration going on with it. So you're pretty much just assigning something to it. But you could say, it's saying window 1, but we could instead say, yeah, I'm not going to mess with that. There's other ways of doing this. I got another donation. What the heck are you guys giving me money for? That's awesome. Thanks. I appreciate it. Oh. All right. What else we got here? Physically based real time. They gave you animated water, but they didn't give you bump maps. You jerks. They're going to give you bump maps next year. I promise. Mow this cross-section slider. That is very cool. Do we get to import? Can you import object files? You can. Okay. So you can import an object file. Why would you want to? You go use Canvas scan. You want to go import some stupid Canvas scan like this, like so, drawing units in meters, and we need to rotate it 90 on the x-axis, center this view up, and we're going to see that this is not rotate on the X. No, rotate on the X-axis is correct. There's no smoothing angle that you can adjust. That's okay. And there's no 2D CAD that you can adjust. I guess that's okay as well, because this is not going to automatically generate the correct size CAD. That's too bad. But what I did just do is bring in a scan of a bathroom. And how would it be much easier to see this bathroom is if you searched cross section slider and cut this bad boy right through the top, like so. And so now we can more easily see inside that this is a scan from LiDAR coming from an iPhone or an iPad. And you might be able to trace this in a 3D view by drawing out your walls in 3D. So that's cool that you guys get to import objects. That's pretty clever. You can get some third-party stuff that looks pretty good. And we already know that that third-party stuff, let's see what formats we get here. Import 3D symbol, DXF, OBJ, 3ds, STL, SK. I guess that none of those formats really bring in bump maps. So we still don't quite have the ability to bring in bump maps. But you can import collibs files, which might have bump maps. So there is that. There is that. All right. Walk through editing, pause keyframes, and use multi-select to edit as many as one. Something that is very cool about having a correct NVIDIA card that supports DLSS is that your walkthrough renderings can become extremely fast and good looking. Let's just take this camera and I'm going to create an orbital walkthrough path. That's going to kill the cross-section slider. Let me just expand that I've got a camera 1, a camera 2. So that's the end keyframe. I'm not going to add any keyframes, but for this segment here, I'm going to flatten that and then snap it to itself to get rid of that segment. Make a slight arc. Now I've got camera 1 looking at the building kind of over here. Camera 2 is looking at the building on this side. I could open up the walkthrough preview. That's fine. Because I have a compatible card, we can switch this to a ray trace view, and at keyframe number 1, I could frame the view of keyframe number 1 if I wanted to. So I'm going to go to the starting keyframe, kind of frame the shot the way I want to, rotate, pan, dolly, etc. Any other hotkeys that you might know how to use here that I don't know how to use here? Let me just set height is 5'4". That'll help me. And now I can pan this up. Let me get to keyframe number 2. Okay, same thing, 5'4", and frame this the way I want to, something like that. We can add in a keyframe, sure. And then I bet you it's not going to allow me to walk. Yeah, it's not going to allow me to do this. But if we were to just show a walkthrough preview, you can see here, this is ray traced. And look how fast it processes this. This is all if you have a card that's capable of doing DLSS, which is like a neural networks AI-based denoising. So it's live denoising on the GPU itself. Pretty cool. This is some high-tech stuff that Homedesigner people never got to utilize before. This is the first time you've gotten to use this. Auto hide items in small spaces. What the heck is that? We don't even have that in the Premiere line. Auto hide items in small spaces. Oh, they're just naming it something a little bit different. So this is, if we just search hide exterior facing, camera facing exterior walls. You have to be in a camera view. Let's undo our section slider. Done. Okay, and then hide exterior. This is a really quick and easy way as you pan around here that we are hiding things that are attached to the walls. Now, if you have some small object, some decor item or something like that, and it's attached to the wall, technically speaking, a base cabinet is not attached to the wall. The wall cabinet and the backsplash are, so you're seeing that those are disappearing. So this is a way that we can hide this. A really huge benefit of this is if you go in from an exterior camera and you are trying to change a platform height, you can select the wall, tab in, and now you're getting a platform height. So I'm effectively changing the height of this. Now, keep in mind we don't have tab input, so we would want to tab in and select the dimension if we can. And it's not letting me select that dimension. That's too bad. But this is a way in the Premiere line that we can quickly and easily change the overall height of a structure. And this would typically rebuild our roofs. I might have circumvented the auto build roof dialog. I did. Tap, tap, tap. There we go. So now it's rebuilding. And this is an old glitch with Chief Architect where that gutter profile is showing, you know, its old location. And out of display options, you're going to find that, let's just type gutter. There is no gutter, so it's going to be York or moldings. Something that is locked. Gutters, roofs, gutters. So you kind of have to unlock gutters to be able to select this sucker to even be able to get rid of it. And that's even if it's selectable. And maybe you have to rebuild it 3D. Look at me, I'm breaking Chief Architect. Nothing new. Nothing to see here. I do it all the time. Don't worry. Yep, that's because I put on a custom gutter profile that I brought in from somewhere else. Oops. Let's see. Are there ways to work around the cabinet wizard limitations of home design? That seems like a giant loss to not have access to sides and back options. I agree. No options for that. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is probably something that would come to your mind as well, which is I got a cabinet here. Let me just shrink this down to the point where it's 3/4 of an inch, and now I'm just using this to actually manually build that custom cabinet that I'm not going to have to build all that often, right? Let me draw a CAD line, copy paste, reflect about the CAD line, specify this. So I'm just going to fake this because we still do have custom. So if I just needed a finished side, that's essentially what I just did here, right? And we could still make this custom countertop. We could say that this cabinet has no overhang, or yeah, has a 0-inch overhang. And so the custom countertop will become the overhang. And so I've effectively made a paneled side, right? That's a way of doing it. I would just have to open this up and say that it doesn't have flat sides. And that's going to pick that up. Yeah, there we go. Paneled. Blah, blah, blah. Or panel. Right. There we go. Paneled side cabinet. Flush this out. Cool. The last thing about this I get, well, we'd shrink the size of this down to 0. Right, there we go. That's more like it. That's what I would do. Yeah, that would be my workaround. You knew that. You were testing me. All right, physically based real-time ray tracing, animated water, modeless walkthrough, auto hide, library catalog, access hundreds of bonus and manufacturer catalogs at no additional charge. I mean, that is just so dang worth it. I don't even have all the catalogs downloaded because I like to make a lot of my own stuff. But like, if we just look at the number of catalogs I do have downloaded. And is there a way to search all? I mean, just one catalog has 780 items. If I just scroll through these, just that plants catalog has 780 items. You get access to things like Polar and they had Brizo and stuff like that. Those kind of catalogs. Yeah, Brizo catalog, 780 items. Polar catalog's 2,500 items. Like, you're getting thousands of items if you pay for the Homedesigner subscription. I can't tell you that that's more than worth the cost of what you're paying for it. You're paying $380 or something like that for the subscription. You are getting access to catalogs that you can't otherwise buy for that price. You just can't. It's not possible. And the amount of time it would take for you to go find the design files from those manufacturers, and guess what? I'd say probably about 6 out of 10 of those manufacturers don't have low poly count models. Chief Architect's taken the time to do that so that your software runs fast. You might go get something from like Delta that's from their design files, and we'll try it. Let's go look at something real quick. I just proven the point here. Let's go Delta 3D models. Faucet. Unfortunate name, Delta. Oops. Here's their BIM library or their product design files. I'm just going to choose one here. Let's download the SketchUp version of this. Boy, do I have a login. Let me see. Should have picked one that didn't need a login. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to drag this in and okay, this one's not too bad. It's 4,000 faces, but oftentimes you'll get something like this and it's 40,000 faces. And then suddenly you got 4 of these objects in plan and suddenly, yeah, your software is slowing down to a complete crawl. Let's go take a look. We hadn't looked at any of the metal finishes that Chief Architect has. So here's an example of brushed chrome. And, if you switch it, DLSS has kind of a cartoonish look at times. So if you're getting that look, you can turn this back off and let's kick the samples down to 30. And we can see here, yeah, that looks like chrome. We're getting reflections off of it. Chrome polished. Yeah, look at that. Cool. Don't you want a polished cabinet? Chrome cabinet like that? Look at that. Isn't that cool? Yeah, if you're unfamiliar with ray tracing and you don't have a compatible card, you're going to see this denoising. The denoising is handled on the CPU. So at the end of the number of samples that you specify, once your graphics card has sample being that, we have right now with the camera still, this is pixel to pixel resolution. These are still pixels. They're static. They're not dynamic anymore. We're not moving. So what we're doing is we're taking distance from the camera to the pixel and we're tracing the paths of light. And so we are sampling a pixel based on those lights bouncing a number of times, reflections bouncing, refraction bouncing, okay? And we are sampling that one pixel enough times so that we understand how light absorption is happening, how light reflection is happening based on the material properties. Okay, so we're sampling each pixel on the screen right now 30 times before anything that is undersampled, meaning that the program can't figure out what that pixel should look like. Anything that is undersampled turns into some kind of firefly, and so the CPU takes a look at neighboring pixels and then denoises, basically turns that white pixel into some kind of color pixel based on the pixels around it. So that maybe helps you understand how a modern ray trace engine works. And my flying gutter still. Okay, what else we got here? I lost my new features PDF. Here we go. Let's see, Curious Skeptic, what are you saying? Yeah, you could create styles, absolutely. What are you saying that's insane to? I like that response. That seems like a Spectorate response. That's insane. Let's see. Sort library browser search results. Oh, so if you didn't have this before, man, cool. You're going to be really happy with that. Please go to my channel, the same place that you're watching this on. Go into the search menu, type in library, and you will find, since now you get our Premiere Line's modern library, you will find Chief Architect X15 library browser extensive tips and tricks, and you will find a lot of cool things that you can do with the new functions of library in Homedesigner 2026. Even though this was made for X15, you're getting our version of the library now. So you can do Boolean string searches, you can add filters, you can limit by class, you can add tags. This is the first thing that I would do here is go ahead and add the tags into your settings. These are some tags that were just brought in with a couple of items I brought in, but you can create your own tag system. I'll show you how cool this can be. If I wanted to find lights for, let's just say, for instance, bath and bed, and they're attached to the wall, and I want a light, look how quickly I just limited to searches for lights. Isn't that cool? I found a bunch of sconces, vanity lights, immediately just by using this tag system. So I'm stacking these tags up, but super simple. I want to go living room. I want to find, I don't know, let's say we're going to find some furniture for a living room, and that furniture is not wall stuff. It's going to be mounted to the floor. This is going to get me to lounges, sofas, right? Pretty cool. So you have that now in Homedesigner. That's a good one. Oh, I'm on the right here. Okay. Display windows open. All right, we got that too. That's pretty cool. That's just this this guy right here. Bam. That'll show this partially open. If you want to control how open it is, it's right here in the general panel, percent open. Let's say 70%. We're going to see that in the preview update over here. Cool. Ramp tool. Do you not have the ramp tool in? Let's take a look at this. Let's go look at Homedesigner 2025. Did we not have the ramp tool? Sure, yeah, okay. Staircase, stairs. Yeah, you had ramp. Okay, so what are they saying then? Ramp tool, input slope, and lock ramp top or bottom. Okay, so I guess we just didn't have some additional automatic height, base height, bottom height, top height. I guess there's a difference. Let's go see what that difference is. So we got stairs, draw stairs, draw a ramp. What's the, oh, lock, start, lock in. That's what we picked up. Okay. Understood. In case you didn't know this about ramps, ramps can be used to do basically create molding extrusion profiles where you don't otherwise have molding tools. I don't think you have molding tools. Trim, no, you do not have molding tools the way we do in the Premiere line. Premiere line, we can do a lot with multitude of different extrusion profiles, okay? And so you don't quite have the same thing in the Homedesigner line, so you got to get a little bit clever. If you want to get clever with this, we can essentially say that if you get to the materials panel and we call the ramp insulation air gap, right? That is a see-through material. So now we have a see-through. If we change the rendering type to standard, look at that, it's see-through, right? So we change railing to only be on one side. Now we've got some kind of a railing tool that is going up a slope, if you follow my meaning here. So let's limit the size of this thing almost just to the size of the railing. And then let me right click this and look at that. I can bend it. Now we've got a railing profile that if we change the rendering view, just looks like it's going up some kind of a slope, right? So let's say the top height is 12 inches and the bottom height is 0 inches. Let's make it higher than that. Let's go 8 feet. And the bottom height, let's see, we don't want to lock slope, we want to lock heights. And bottom height 0. Look at that. I've got an extrusion profile I am somehow creating. Now I want you to notice something. The top railing, which is a square molding, is just turning at the segmented length of the newel post. We know this because if we switch to a vector view and kind of expand the look of this, okay, we're seeing that that profile twists at the newel spacing. So if I'm just trying to get some extrusion wrap or do some kind of crazy shape just for the purpose of visuals, I could say a couple things. Railing, I don't want to include bottom rail. I don't want to raise lower, doesn't matter. Newels, balusters, let's say I don't actually want balusters at all. Can we set them to 0 width? Do they disappear? They do. Can we set newels to 0 width and do they disappear? They do. Now if we set spacing on the newels to 1 inch, now we have an extrusion profile that follows the shape, right? So that if we go look at this in a 3D view, you have created a really clever little extrusion. Pretty neat. Then if you went and tried to break it by applying my gutter profile, which you knew I was going to do. Yeah, that's a pretty clever little, that's a slide. All you got to do is change the molding size and now I got a slide coming off the roof. Right? Yeah, we have rail designations here. Let's call this 36 inches wide and, you know, and call it 12 inches tall, maybe 24 inches tall. Yeah, there you go. Got a big slide. Cool. All right, what else we got? Framing defaults. What the heck? We just got framing defaults. You guys get that too, huh? And framing defaults are pretty cool because you can carry with them annotations that are your preferred annotations, even if the framing member isn't exactly what you need, or you can, you know, just set every framing default to have an automatic label. Someone mentioned something that I want to show. I'm going to go ahead and close all the views, and because this is getting a little crazy. Close all views. Obviously, we can't save. That's no problem. And let's start from a little bit of a new. Sure. And let's draw this out. So, someone said that you no longer have bearing lines and that you used to have bearing lines. And I just wanted to show that we probably have a workaround for that. So that means if we're going to build, by the way, I would add this to your toolbars. Go ahead and customize your toolbars and say build all. Oops, build all. And build all framing. I would drop this into the framing here. I know there's a drop down for this somewhere or something like that, but I would want to use this. So I'm just going to build all framing for the floor structure. And yeah, let's go ahead and show it. And let's go down a floor and we can see here's our framing members. So we do have what? Joist direction. I think I just saw it. Yeah, joist direction. So I can say joist direction this way, okay? And then let me also say joist direction this way. But we've got no bearings, so these two are conflicting. So what can you do? For one, I believe you should be able to, because you don't have a bearing, there's no bearing line in here. And I guess there used to be. I'll have to double check that. And there's, yeah, and this is where it would be, it's in framing. But you do have a roof and ceiling beam, floor ceiling truss, floor ceiling beam. So if I drew a floor ceiling beam in here and show this, now that becomes the bearing line. And this would be, I mean, this would be a typical construction, right? We need to have the beam. In this case, they're hanging, they're not sitting on top. It's not a girder. So we're going to hang it off that beam. And now it's taking on those direction lines, right? Another approach to this, let me go up a floor, is that, or actually I can just even go down a floor. I don't even need a bearing wall above. I could just draw in a straight foundation wall here. And that's going to turn off auto build, sure, that's fine, and open it up, and in the structure panel, set this to bearing. And same thing is going to happen here. Let me get rid of this beam. Or try to get rid of that beam, whatever the heck that beam was. And let's just build all framing again. And actually, let's go. We have the ability to delete objects. We can delete all framing. Yes, 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 all framing, yes, and then build all framing again. And there we go, it's resting on that stem wall. So now we've got a sistered situation. So even though you don't have the bearing line tool, you can still create bearing with either foundation walls or with beam. There you go. Are you able to modify jack stud widths? Let's see what we got going on here for that. So let's throw a little window in here. And I'm gonna have to delete all framing, but let's open up the window. Let's see what we have in framing panel. And we've got king stud trimmer count. I don't even think we get to change jack stud widths, technically speaking, inside of the Premiere line. Tell you the truth. I don't think so. I don't think. All right, so what we call jack studs over here, we got a king stud and what we call a trimmer, and then we've got cripples. Cripples are going to be underneath this sill. They're supporting that lower sill. And our trimmers are, I think, what you're calling jack studs. I'm fairly certain. And so that's picking up our header. So they're calling it trimmer as well. So we would be calling this jack studs. Another name for jack studs, well, I think that's what you're calling it. Are we able to modify jack stud widths? Nope, we don't. I'm not sure what you're saying. Nope, we don't too. So tell me more if you wouldn't mind. But yeah, I don't think we have the ability to change that. So we do have framing defaults. And I think it's just general wall framing. So we don't have, I don't know that we get to pick and choose what the jack stud's being drawn from. And in the Premiere line, we get a wall framing detail, and you guys do not get that. Let me just show you this real quick. In the Premiere line, I can take any wall, frame that wall, and then open up a detail where I then get to very quickly and easily change what these framing member widths are. So that's the way I would do that. And we in fact have like wall bridging tools and stuff like that that just draw through. So it's very different in the Homedesigner line. It does look like it's, it's framing. Let's see. Let's just do this. Delete framing again. And build all framing. And so am I able to select this framing member? Yes. So, you can select it and you can modify it. Right? So there is that. So there is a way to do it. It's just a manual way. I don't see the way that we would do that automatically. That helps you? What is this? This is move to framing reference. Okay. Join lap ends, join miter ends. Yeah, so you'd have to manually do something like that, I believe. Additional space, add frame. So I would probably, if you were going to resize all your jack studs and you're going to size them up, I would add more to the additional space in the rough opening, additional width, to account for you manually resizing your jack studs. And you could do that as your default window. But yeah, you just have numbers and framing method use standard box. Yeah. Yeah, that's all you got for that. All right. Rope lighting, okay. And that really helps in your 3D views for the ray trace stuff. I wonder if you can set your own extrusion profile for rope lighting. Found out you guys don't have layer hider, which is such a shame. I want to turn off these layers now. There's no fast way of doing that. Too bad. Oops. Messed that up, huh? There is no connect. Oh, there is a connect wall tool. Cool. That cool. All right. And there's a gable end tool. Cool. All right. What was I looking at here? Oh, so the framing defaults. You can set your different types up. So like you can make a copy of joists, I-joists, right? And just call these LVL. And then change that type and keep the roll LVL. And you can even set this to default to a bearing beam, so that you're just changing the framing member default, and immediately that makes it a bearing member that is an LVL. So there's some really cool stuff in the framing member defaults you can get into. The other thing that you might be able to get into, so they do give you access to object information, and this is where you can edit the default description. So as soon as you place this, you know a little bit of scripting, you could, put the automatic description and then add info, or replace the automatic description based on some condition, if you will, so that if I then go build with a framing member, like what, just a general framing member, or floor ceiling beam, draw a floor ceiling beam. Sure, turn this on and use automatic, and we're going to use that LVL. No, I want to use the one I created. Look, we do have access to a roll of king stud, etc. So I wonder if there is some setting for that somewhere. Yeah, there's cripple, so there's got to be trimmer in here. Interesting. So maybe there is a way to do that at a Finvestments. What am I doing wrong here though? Roll options roll. I wanted to pick up the default. Let me instead try this. We'll try build framing for what? Floors. Build framing once. Floors. Yeah. Look at that, and picked up bearing. Same thing, build framing once. If you didn't know this, I think we get mnemonic keys. Yes, we do, in So you can just use keystrokes to get this build framing dialog box. Let's just do auto. That's interesting. This is still not building the way I want it to, but where is my new default I created? Don't see it, so not sure exactly where that comes into play. I think it comes into play from the room designation. So let's try this. Let's open this structure. Yeah, I'm having a brain fart. Excuse me. Floor structure, joists, LVL. There we go. Now it's going to make a bunch of bearing stuff. Sure. Yeah, it's going to build out a bunch of LVLs that are all bearing. Funny. All right. So that's how you would utilize that. And then if you changed your layer settings to show labels on framing members. Framing. Roof truss labels framing. Where's our framing labels? Boy, this is so cumbersome sometimes to find some of the stuff in here. I commiserate. Just trying to see if we got those automatic labels to show up, but it doesn't look like it. There's the description, automatic descriptions in there, but it doesn't seem to have any, we don't seem to have access to a framing label. That's really interesting. So I guess you could instead pull a text box, rich text, and say label, and pick one of these up, and maybe pick that up. Yeah, it's not really reporting anything. Funny. I'd have to mess with that some more to see why that's not all driving and we're not getting info out of that framing. All right, let me move on. That was getting a little slow. Terrain landscape, terrain reference point. That's a big one for me. I really like this workflow, so I'll just draw a four-sided. Actually, let's just draw an L-shaped house real quick. So if you're going to create a terrain perimeter, okay, and then I'm going to slope this. I don't think you have the transform or replicate tools that we have in Premiere. So if I draw in some terrain data here, and this is 0 elevation, do you have transform replicate? You do. You have transform replicate. Okay, so I can make, let's call it 12 copies of this, and I'm going to move it in the Y. Let's just say it's moving every 5 feet, and every 5 feet, I'm dropping 3 feet. Negative 3 feet. So I'm making a copy of this terrain elevation, and I'm making a copy every 60 inches, every 5 feet, and at every 5 feet, I'm dropping the terrain 3 feet. And so that's what this just did, okay? So that if I pull a 3D view, we're going to see a very sloped terrain, right? Like this. Now you can of course tab through this and drop this, and that's going to turn off auto build foundation. And now you could try to step this by turning on a pony wall, you know, on this assembly, etc. But the really impactful part of this is automatically this is trying to, you know, figure out what the reference point is. But let's say that we have a different reference point. Let's open up the terrain and then uncheck where absolute elevation is. And instead we're going to use a reference point. And at the reference point, I'm going to say that the terrain is at negative 12 inches. And my datum shows that it should be at negative 12 inches right here. And everything else is going to be cut and fill, which will require a terrain retaining wall. Now, I don't know if you get to select the exterior room. You do, but you don't get to create a molding line from that. And I don't know if you get the cut and trim tools. You don't. And wow, is that a professional tool that I would miss big time. Cut and trim makes it so that anything crosses the bounds of the interior side of this polyline, I can trim automatically with a trim tool. And so not having that is huge, and you don't even have union subtraction. Oh boy, that's really challenging. I'll show you an example of what this is in the Premiere line. For example, I've got a building here. I get to take this building and make it into a polyline. And let's just say I had a bunch of lines carrying through this building and they were all topo, right? I get to take this, use my trim tool, sticky mode it so I can use it multiple times and trim all of those polylines crossing the path of my building so that my terrain is then interpolated in a different way and it's not considering the building's maybe flat terrain, especially if I concentrically resize this and use the trim tool to pull stuff, 10 feet away from the building line. And this is just one of those things, if we're doing professional's job and we're doing some kind of cut and fill stuff and we're doing some really serious terrain, that's a tool I just can't deal without. So you guys don't have that. The other thing that we have here is, yeah, I've got this one polyline that I created way out here. Well, I can create some other polyline and across the path of this, select one, and I can union it, join it to the other, or I can subtract it, or I can show the difference between the two. So those are some pretty huge tools, especially when it comes to terrain data, because now you got to be really careful about your topo. You just can't get it too close to the building or it's going to make terrain a really difficult task. So let's get back to the point of this new feature, which is I'm opening this up and it's saying we're going to use that reference point. And at that reference point, I need the terrain to be negative 12 inches here. It will not update until I either update the terrain, rebuild the terrain, or come to this view. But here we go. This is showing us that we need retention on the top side of this, that this is exactly 12 inches below our 0 mark. And the slope falls beyond that. So, but that is a cool addition to the software. Let's see, what have we been doing? 2 hours, man. That's a pretty good segment on this. Obviously nowhere near to comparing all the features from the Premiere line to the HD line. And I could probably do another show where I'm actually looking at their printed PDF difference of the two tools. But there's some major tools on the Premiere line that are just some tools that make life really, really easy. Obviously, the layer set dynamic that we saw earlier on, where I get to just draw my building and I've already got all the trades built out and sent to layout automatically. If you're doing more than 6 projects a year, that to me is worth that 6 projects a year upgrade to the Premiere line. Ray tracing, there's some things that you can do to start building out your ray trace library on the Homedesigner line. And this is your starting point. This is the first time that you've had ray tracing. So this is the first time that you get to go dig through a massive amount of catalogs that team put together. Big shout out to Dustin Cruz. That guy is an absolute workhorse. He's creating, I think he creates all materials for Chief Architect. And this is the first time that you're going to get to see them with their capabilities of what they look like in a ray trace view, and appreciate the heck out of it because he works his butt off to make these things look good in all views. Now let's see if you have a Move Sun tool. You do have the Move Sun tool. That's cool. You get to click and drag. You're going to take use of this in these ray trace views because this will really make a difference in how these things show up. The other thing that I would recommend doing is taking a look at in the library browser, there probably is some HDR backdrops. You might have to type in backdrop, limit type backdrops. See if you can't find some of the spherical ones. So you might want to limit to a bonus catalog. Number 2 HDR. You're going to want to download this. So you right click and download. This is how catalogs work now. All right. And then you punch in your credentials. They might not let me do this. We'll see. Otherwise I can import this from a third party. I mean, from the Premiere line. Oh, they let me. Cool. So the HDR stuff, these are true spherical backdrops that have a radiance channel that can emulate a light source. And so let me just take Farm Sunset, for instance, and we're going to see just how drastically that lighting quality changed there. And so then not only do we have the Move Sun tool, we get to move the sun around to kind of get an ideal shot here. I would typically tell you to turn the sun down if you're going to use an HDR. So use a generic sun, set this to something like 12,000. Get into the rendering technique options here. And you can set up your backdrop intensity. Let's pump that up a little bit. So that's having more of a tonal quality on this shot. And then you might be able to search the move backdrop tool. Let me see, it's called move backdrop. Let's call back import backdrop, rotate spherical backdrop. And so now we can rotate this. And since it's got directional sun, I want you to see what happens here. I'm going to turn off the sun. Right? Toggle sunlight. No, I'm going to just set the sun to be, let's see, rendering technique options. I'm going to use only backdrop for lighting. And so now if I rotate the backdrop, look at how the side of the building is lit right now. That's because the backdrop has that radiance channel and it's got a directional sun in it. So see, as I rotate this around, now this is in shadow and this front face is lit up. So this can make for some really good looking shots that you've never seen before in the Homedesigner line. This would be exciting to me because you can really sell a job with this, especially when you build out the landscaping, take some time on this. Pretty cool. I'm going to call it quits. I got to go make some money somehow, or have some dinner, or sleep, or do all that other stuff that you got to do in these nights. So I hope you enjoy this. You got questions, bam, hit me up with the comments, please. I can do another session of this where maybe we're talking more in depth about true side-by-side comparisons. I just wanted to dive in here and show you what you're getting in this new version. Right off the bat, catalogs, 3D dimensions are just huge, 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 huge. So thanks for watching.